this is way up on the side of a pretty tall glacial mountain. It used to be capped by snow. There was cover over this ice, and it was only recently the snow melted. And guess what? It exposed these beautiful veins like the sherbet. They did a lot of channel sampling very early time period, and they got some really nice thicknesses, but also really nice grades. Like gold was typically 10, 15 gram gold equivalent over, a few meters, like 6 to 10 meters, something like that. Really caught my attention, particularly with the continuity and the geometry of the thing, with all of the veins being effectively above the valley bottom.
Good afternoon, everyone. Special time because we have special guests on today. This is the Everything Lithium chat that we're going to have, and it's a real pleasure that we get to have two analysts on. Koby Kushner, who we've had on a number of times. Don't remember him from Red Cloud, but also Koby's moved on because he has his own Libra Lithium deal, which we were talking about a couple months back, and it was private at that point. There's lots of news we'll get into, and I'll let Koby talk about that, and we'll brush into that. So we'll get a perspective from him of the lithium market, what it looks like, and obviously why he likes it and formed a company, and that company has a relationship with KoBold Metals. And on top of that, we are pleased to have Chris Williams, who's an analyst out of Hong Kong, out of Adamas Intelligence. So this is Everything Lithium. I think it's a very poignant time to talk about unloved metals and mining like lithium. Everyone wants to talk about gold. Everyone wants to talk about silver, uranium now because of the whole deep seek issue. There's lots of huge topics to talk about, but I always come back to something that Rick Rule says, and within the cycle, there's a cycle, and whenever there's a metal that's unloved, that's critical, that we desperately need, that people aren't paying as much attention to, maybe you should start thinking about building a position into it. Let's talk to Koby first and say, hey, Koby, how are you? Good to see you here. How are you?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks for having me on again. Excited to share the news.
You're definitely a fan here. Lots of people love to have you on, and you're requested back quite often. So we're looking forward to having a chat just about your kind of views moving forward, but also all of the big news that you have coming out of Libra. And I'll take a sneak peek at now Libra Energy, but I won't steal all your thunder. So lots happening. And Chris, how are you? Thank you so much for making this out of Hong Kong. That's why we're having this special time. How is your 2025 started? And maybe also just kind of give us a bit of a background for those that aren't familiar with Adamas Intelligence, what you guys focus on and what value chain and proposition you offer.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be on here and talk about 2025 and the outlook for lithium. So Adamas Intelligence is an independent market research and advisory firm. We're focused on mine to application supply chains for rare earth elements and battery metals. We provide clients with transparent deep dives, data-rich market trackers and forecasts backed by a lot of primary research. We've been in business since 2012. We have clients on 6 continents, mining companies, technology companies, material developers, institutional investors, and as well as other advisory firms. So, yeah.
And you focus a lot more on the Pacific region. I mean, of course, you have exposure and understanding of the world market, but is it more kind of focused on that region?
No, I'd say it's really a global reach. With definitely a focus more recently on North America.
Okay.
And with my position here in China at the moment, definitely have a good view of the belly of the beast of the the EV industry and everything else. So
let's just jump there because you're in the place that's light years ahead, I would argue. And maybe you could tell me otherwise. They've been developing logistics supply chains, whether it's for all the production of metals, lithium, rare earth, you name it, the batteries, every component. I mean, full vertical integration. What are you seeing, for 2025? Just give your kind of thesis, from sitting right there, as you say, in the belly of the beast.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a source of national pride for the Chinese. I was watching the New Year's Eve, Lunar New Year's Eve celebrations last night, and there was a lot of showcasing of all the domestic EV brands, the robotics companies, and the AI was sort of used in the production of the event as well. And so yeah, they're quite proud of it, and they've obviously put 20 odd years of work into building the supply chains to support those industries. So they've got all the reason to celebrate, really. And yeah, just on the streets, it's great to really see, touch and feel the brands that you see as an analyst, and you count the sales quantities and all that. It's good to see them on the streets, and go to dealerships and whatnot and try them out, and it's pretty exciting as an analyst to be able to do that. So
just the cutting edge developments too, like and I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more, but when you look at I see like the interchangeable batteries that they're kind of progressing with, instead of going, hey, I'll buy an EV and a battery, is that no, you're going to trade, you're going to swap that battery. That you know what, let's leave that there because I'm jumping way too far ahead in the future, but you're talking about like really cool things and you sit right there to see it. We're a little bit more taken apart or back from it, although North America is very keen on doing this transition. It must be really wild to see in action the development and just the efficiency of getting things done at a rapid pace. That must be pretty exciting to watch as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen that in action. We've seen China's ability to invest counter-cyclically in the resource space, which is part of the reason why they're in such a dominant position in controlling the supply chains. And yeah, I'm sure we can dive deeper into the lithium markets specifically.
We'll jump in and just have Koby jump in and kind of throw in, what's your take on 2025? What do you think? I mean, obviously you've got lots of exciting news. So, but let's start before we get into all the details of specifically the great news you have with your projects. What do you think of the overall lithium market? I mean, it's gotten beat up a little bit in the last year. To me, that's awesome. I think it's exciting. Here's my perspective. Yeah, it's like I'm a long-term investor. Like, yeah. I mean, maybe it's my age or just I'm a bit more patient. So when I see the pullback that happened last year, I'm psyched. Like we have our positions in gold and companies are doing really well right now. We're very excited. But if you want to look at something right now where you're like, well, where can I take a bite out of something and start building a position? Lithium. I mean, I don't care what narrative is out there. This ship is going, this sailed, this transition's happening. It's moving forward in all its glory. And I'm talking too much, so I'll let you go, Koby.
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting. Even the most bearish of the banks, the ones that were historically the most bearish, even the most bearish ones are forecasting the deficit to return by the end of the decade. And a lot of the forecasts that I was reading, which were kind of late 2024, since then we've already seen even more supply come off the market, probably more that's come off than that's come on. Will we have a deficit in 2025? I don't know. Chris, I imagine you might have an opinion there. If it's not in 2025, then totally possible it come back in 2026 or 2027. But either way, I think prices have bottomed, even amongst the most bearish banks, including Morgan Stanley. They are all anticipating price recoveries from here. Now, no one's forecasting it to go back to where it was previously at the height of 2022. But the thing is that the stuff is hard to forecast. Is the reality. This is a small sector, and it's young and it's immature. And it's one of those things where you have a couple big operations come offline for a bit, or a couple big operations go back online, and it changes the whole supply demand dynamics. And it's fickle like that. But I kind of hope prices don't return back to spot prices, to be clear, I hope that they don't come back to $80 a kilo level, because it just attracted too much dumb money in the space. And a correction is very healthy for this market. And it allows guys like myself and you to go and be counter-cyclical. Now's the time to be doing that.
There's a lot to unpack here because China dominates lithium production. And once again, you'd hear here in Canada, people say, well, they've kind of sewn it all up. They're doing this. Like, well, they're the only ones that were really putting a ton of money towards it. They were excited about it. They wanted to fund things. I said to people, you could have invested in lots of lithium projects here. Why didn't you? And why isn't our government more excited and being more active? And yet Canada is kind of taking the position that, well, we don't know if we can take some of the money now from there. And it's like, well, they're the only ones that are aggressively interested in funding a lot of this. So it is a bit of a frustration whenever you hear in the West that we're going to do this, yet we can't take certain money from certain places. It's a very interesting market because of that. And I only bring that up because at one point, I believe it was 6 or 7 months ago, there was a U.S. official who blamed some of the price action on China, saying, hey, they're messing with us. It's a trade war. This is going on. And my response, and I'll get your take, Chris Williams, on it, is, well, yeah, if you leave all of the production, or 90% or 70%, whatever it happens to be, depending on rare earth or lithium or whatever production, if you leave it to one place and you leave that dominant metal, which is critical to everything from the crypto, AI, robotics, EVs, all of it, well, then, yeah, it's hard to play hardball with them. What's your take, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a classic playbook from China with regards to dominating like the midstream part of the supply chain. And that's certainly the case with lithium. Currently they're sitting at 70% refining control of the industry, and very high, similar percentage of the downstream as well. In terms of consumption of lithium. And I guess a consequence of that, it's part of that is a consequence of the West's inability to really put capital forward in a democratic free market sort of environment where there's a lot of different stakeholders who make it sort of difficult for projects to get going. So that's sort of structurally my thoughts on how the lithium market is set up. Yeah,
I would get angry because I'd say, well, what are all these billionaires doing? Like, what are they? How come they're not funding this? I don't get it. And this is a good segue for Libra. Is if you look at KoBold metals, oh, well, that's funded by Jeff Bezos and Mr. Gates. And oddly enough, we have someone here that has now a relationship with them through Libra. So maybe, Koby, you jump in and tell us what the relationship and how that came about with the private company, Libra, that you have that's going public here. How did that come about with KoBold Metals?
Okay, how did that one come about? We were massaging that deal for a while now. Over a year ago, really. We were somewhat new to the game, and it was before we had really made any discoveries. And at this point, there was no such thing as a lithium expert. When I say there was no such thing as a lithium expert, there's not a lot of geologists that really specialized in lithium, specifically on lithium pegmatites. Back in the day, if you did your master's or PhD thesis on a lithium pegmatite, you were a weirdo. It was all about copper porphyries or something else. Like, who does this niche weird mineral that has no use? There wasn't a lot of experts out there. We're fortunate to eventually get introduced to one, Lot Koopmans, who's now an advisor to us. But before we met Lot, we were introduced to a guy from Western University who used to teach there, and his name is Bob Lennon. And we showed him our projects, and he said, "This is really cool. Like, there's a lot of good potential here." Just so you know, I recently started up at this company called KoBold, and we want to take a deeper look in what you guys have, and the rest is history. We're introduced to Will Fenley and Daniel, and really solid, good group of guys there, and they took a deep dive into our projects. They went to site. They liked what we saw, and finally it all materialized, and we were able to announce that deal in December, just last month. So that's a $33 million earn-in on 3 of our several projects. They're all in Ontario. So they have to, in order to earn up to a 75% stake in these projects, they have to fund $33 million worth of exploration. And for us, what really attracted us to them is that they don't operate like any other mining company out there. We've had other business dealings with other major companies, and KoBold is very different. They have kind of like one data science. They have an approximate 1-to-1 ratio between a geoscientist and a data scientist, and you have dedicated lithium teams and dedicated data scientists assigned to each project.
Yeah.
And what we saw was an opportunity to make additional discoveries with KoBold. But yeah, no, we're happy that materialized, Andrew. Earlier this summer, I was telling everyone that, guys, we just found the most exciting spodumene discovery in Ontario, and banging the table, and no one even wanted to hear it. And they're like, okay, Koby, most exciting spodumene discovery and since PAC. Yeah, right. And it's one thing for me to tell you this is an awesome project of merit. It's another thing for KoBold to put their name on this now.
Yes.
And I think what also attracted them was also the people aspect. I think I suspect what they liked about Libra was we know how to operate in this area of Ontario. We've been operating here our whole careers. And as a result, they've retained us as an exploration contractor as well, which helps fund our hard dollar needs. And it's pretty cool. I think right now we're the second, to my knowledge anyways, we're the second Canadian company that they've done a deal with. The first one being Midnight Sun, and that's copper in Zambia.
Yep.
And this time it's lithium in Canada. We're very excited to be working with them.
I like to always, liken things back to something simple. And if someone is not as familiar about actual lithium mining, or how does this all work, or how to tell one junior apart, one very good example is, amongst others, is who's funding you. And looking at that kind of group with that kind of backing, that adds so much credibility. Even if someone's new, they go, oh, well, if they saw something, there must be something there. And there is. That's true. Now, it's not a guarantee of anything or a guarantee of stock performance, but it is a guarantee that very smart people threw their names to something and threw a lot of money at an exploration project, and that you should pay attention. Now we're going to jump around a little bit because we are getting questions in, and I don't want to miss any. And if we keep on going on, we might. So we're going to jump a little bit to, which I'm not surprised would come up, but a stock specifically, and you can answer it or not. I'm always careful with putting someone on the spot about a specific project or a company, but do you have any thoughts on clay? And they're talking specifically about Thacker or Rhyolite Ridge. And also they're kind of saying that they're quite doubtful on production timelines. What are your thoughts on timelines? Don't know if you want to jump into that. If you can, I understand. But if you've got any kind of thoughts that you'd like to mention, feel free.
I'll mention I'm no longer IROC regulated, so I'm arguably more free to express my opinion than I was back when you used to interview me, Andrew.
Yes.
But, that being said, I got to be careful not to burn any bridges because I have opinions.
Yes.
Well, look, I think the clays, we have yet, it's a known fact. We have not seen commercial production at scale of any lithium clay. Period. And we haven't seen it work properly. We haven't seen it work at scale. So I'm skeptical as to how it might cost in the end.
Yep.
And I'm skeptical as to when exactly it can come online and produce at scale.
Yep.
That being said, people like to put money into it, and the US DOE likes to put money into it. GM likes to put money into it.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on metallurgy. My understanding is that Ioneer's metallurgy is quite a bit different. It's technically not a clay. It is a sedimentary deposit, however. And there is a boron component as well. My understanding anyways is that the metallurgy there might be a little more straightforward, but I really don't know. I can't
it's a tough
can't
question.
comment any further than that.
No, and I don't want to put, and Chris, I wouldn't put you on the spot, but maybe if you have a favorite between pegmatite, DLE, or clay, is that a safer question maybe to ask rather than specific projects or specific?
No, yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on specific
Okay.
projects to the extent of which that I've researched them. I guess just fundamentally, there's like medium term, the industry really needs to take an all of the above approach, just owing to the sheer quantum of demand that's going to be required of the lithium industry. And because of that pace of growth of demand and the limited scalability of evaporative brines, it really means that everything on to the right in the cost curve has an opportunity to get into the market. So you're talking DLE, clay, and of course spodumene. Now there's as Koby mentioned, there's technical questions to be asked of DLE and clay. Now obviously clay through Lithium Americas has been looked at for like 15 years or so now. So a lot of demonstration work, engineering work has been put into those projects. Big money, as we've seen through the DOE support, the loan packages that they've put through. Just before Trump got in, we saw the closing of the deals for debt financing for both Ioneer and Thacker. The timelines may be aggressive. It's a 3-year construction period for Thacker. They're talking 2027. I think late 2027 was their sort of guidance for phase 1, which I believe is 40,000 ton LCE. And one would expect a pretty long ramp up period for that as well, presuming it gets through. So, and I should also mention that that project hasn't reached FID yet. So there's still a lot of hurdles between now and 2027.
Okay, this is before I go into the permitting and talking about some comments Trump has made, whether it can happen or not. We'll wade into the DLE a little bit. I know you're Koby. You're not a huge fan. We've talked about DLE before. But,
I like DLE.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm actually more bullish on DLE than I am the clays personally. Yeah. I think any kind of new-ish technology needs a lot of things ironed out, and arguably DLE has been producing commercially. If you want to talk Hombre Merito, but they do it in conjunction with evaporation. I've never been to China, Chris. You might have better insights since you're the guy there, but apparently there might be. I think it's Sunresin or someone that's been doing pure play DLE, or at least has tried it. But I think I think why I'm more keen on DLE than I am the clays is because at least with DLE, if you want to scale up production, you're not limited necessarily by the geometry of your ore body anymore.
Yeah.
What it comes down to is deliverability. Can you flow your brines out? Because also with evaporation ponds, like to Chris's point before, you're limited in how you can scale that, and you need to be in a desert environment, and you're limited by your evaporation rates. And with DLE, if you no longer need to evaporate it, you could do this in Alberta. You could do this, over in the Smackover or in Saskatchewan. You don't need to be in a desert, and you don't need a giant footprint necessarily either. And if you want to ramp up production, it might be as simple as just drilling more wells.
Yeah. Okay, tell me if I'm wrong, because I think any technology I always like, so I always like to talk about it. And because when you're talking DLE, there's every oil and gas companies who's now getting interested. Exxon's playing around with it. Is that because no one's going to, or very few, as far as I know, will share anything on what they've actually come up with DLE until it's 100% ready to go, that as an analyst or someone, they go, well, how do I know for sure what they're working on? Is that part of the kind of pause that people have DLE? They're also protective that if we put our stuff out, someone's going to see and just copy us and do this and that. Is that some of the pushback do you find?
I don't know if that's a pushback. I think a lot of it is just still speculation. There's I think that might be more the pushback with the technology provider itself, where there's at least there's hundreds of these technology providers all trying to do a different version of the same thing, and they all say that they do it slightly different than the other. And yes, there are different, very different methods of doing it, but I guess it's which one is going to be? Not all of them will work. There's more. I count that there's more technology companies than there are actual brine resource developers, and at the end of the day, the value is in the resource, not the technology.
Yes.
So I mean, for me personally, I'm more keen on the resource and kind of betting, okay, someone else down the line will crack the code on this. I doubt it's going to be a tiny little junior tech company that doesn't have a balance sheet to throw R&D money at this. I suspect it's going to be a big company who might crack the code on it. A big company, whether that's Exxon or Equinor or maybe Ganfeng. I don't know, but someone that has a balance sheet to not be afraid to throw money at this.
What's your take, Chris? What are you seeing out of China with the DLE? I mean, I imagine there's probably 1,000 companies in China alone working on this problem. And also, is part of the issue too that once again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not the level of knowledge as either one of you. Is part of it too that it might have to apply specifically per region? Like it won't be just a one size fits all, like, hey, you move your processor, you can move it around to each station. It's like, no, you have to work with this brine in this setting and this, what tell me if I'm right, wrong, on the right path, or and overall thoughts.
Yeah, I'd say you're on track. DLE obviously is a catch-all phrase, but it's essentially talking about selective extraction of lithium and very high impurity rejection. I guess there's a lot of learning to be done in DLE. China has got a pretty decent head start in this space, partly because of just the sheer quantity of PhDs that they've thrown at the problem. If you look at the Chinese brine resources, they're highly variable in terms of their geochemistry. And it should be stated that all of the DLE production out of China to date has been working on tail brines from potash production. Okay. So as Koby mentioned earlier, there's not many, if at all, pure play DLE projects happening. But there's some entering sort of commissioning phase now. Like Zijin has one. Zijin just made a big investment into Zhang Lithium, who also have interests in 3 major DLE compatible sort of brine resources. So there's lots of movement in the space. Lots of uncertainty, as you mentioned. There's a lot of big money moving into the space. Even Saudi and Saudi Aramco have expressed interest in exploiting their produced water resources from the oil wells. So there's so much uncertainty when it comes to DLE. And I guess as you said earlier, the opacity in what's happening with regards to the technical breakthroughs and whatnot doesn't help matters for observers in the market. But I guess we need to wait and see until we see some real numbers. And I guess really the first cab off the rank there would have to be Aramat Centenario project in Argentina. I think a lot of people are looking at that project right now.
Yeah.
And if that were to be successful and produce lithium carbonate at economic level, I think that would be largely seen as sort of bad news for hard rock miners, as it would unlock a lot of resources out of the lithium triangle area. But the jury's still out on that. We don't have numbers yet.
So there's another question here saying about underground lithium mining. Is it quote unquote dead? That's the question. I would say I'll throw it at Koby first, because I would suspect it's not. It's just kind of what you were saying there. I mean, we're waiting on a million things, and there's a lot of certainty when you're talking about hard rock. But Koby, what's your thoughts?
No, I don't think underground lithium mining is dead. Yes, low hanging fruit is outcropping spots between pegmatites that are right at surface. Usually open pit is lower cost than underground mining. That being said, often underground mining, I'm not just talking about lithium here, but for anything, often underground mining, you can get, you can mine higher grades. You could be a lot more selective. Sometimes that can feed into better margins. Not always, but sometimes you can get amazing margins. If I were to compare it to gold, the lowest ASIC gold project is Fosterville, right? In Australia, and that's a wicked high grade underground. It's not an open pit. So also the other point that I would add there is, look at the Tanko mine. That thing didn't get built for its lithium. Not all pegmatites are mined for lithium, and that's a buried world-class pegmatite. It's very, very zoned, but they're mining it for the cesium and the tantalum. Tanko, original, it starts with the TA, right? Tantalum Corporation in Canada. That was, they were mining lithium concentrate at one point. So as a byproduct of a mine like that, then, lithium could still work underground. I still don't think I don't think underground lithium mining was ever like that alive to begin with. So to say that it's dead, I don't know. This industry is still young and maturing, and I'm sure we will see additional hard rock underground lithium mines. Like, look at Kathleen Valley as another example of a recent one underground that came online, starting with like six portals or something like that.
We're touching on a couple things here too. Is that we talked a bit about regions, and it's great because we've got you're both analysts, global analysts, but you're sitting in Hong Kong, you're sitting with a project in Ontario, and there's a case, and we talked a little bit about Saudi Arabia and their big push. I mean, they just had their I think it's called Forum Convention that they do every year. They've committed an exceptional amount to mining in general, but to any kind of energy transition. Canada itself, Ontario, the supply chain for, just the EV batteries and all these batteries, between Volvo and cattle and whatnot, everything, there's a huge growth curve and obviously massive demand. What do you think as far as regions, Chris, where you can give us a taste of what you see? I mean, China's growing at alarming rates, but where are the regions that you see real progress moving?
Well, really, everyone that is on the left side of the cost curve, the major producers, SQM, Albemarle, the green bushes of the world, they're all going to be increasing, hopefully, at the same pace of growth of the industry at large. So that should be sort of taken for granted, and I think we have seen a lot of statements from those companies to that extent. In terms of like frontier markets, there has been a lot of excitement about Brazil, spodumene, and then obviously in terms of Canada as well, in Quebec and Ontario, there's been a lot of material discoveries there. And as you say, that the idea there is that raw material could plumb directly into those, over 1 terawatt hour of cell capacity going into that region in the next 10 years. So yeah, those are some interesting regions. In terms of what China have been up to, obviously they've been investing sort of wherever they can.
Yeah.
Lithium Triangle, Africa, and domestically. It's an interesting observation I've noted is, they've put a lot of money into Africa, and we have seen a lot of units come from those operations in the last couple of years. But it seems to me that there has been a bit of a steep learning curve from how they've gone about and done that. Maybe it's the transportation costs are pretty high, and every stakeholder over there sort of wants their cut, sort of thing. So it may not be as rosy as what they had initially planned. So there, my sense is that China are really focusing more and more domestically. Excuse me. So I think spodumene is domestic spodumene in China is one space that has a lot of room to grow, particularly out of Xinjiang and Sichuan province, where there's been a lot of discoveries being made. Recently we saw the Chinese government come out with a statement, basically updating their known reserves and resources estimates. So so I think that's a space to watch. But as I said earlier, it's pretty much an all of the above approach.
Yeah.
What
I mean, obviously, Koby, you like Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Ontario. I think it's relative to, people think about spodumene in Canada, they think about spodumene in Quebec. Ontario is kind of secondary, but it's all the same geology. So Superior Craton extends from Quebec through Ontario and even into Manitoba, and it's the same geology. And I think there's a lot of misinformation as to how come these a lot of questions I get, like how come you get these massive deposits found in Quebec, how come they're not in Ontario? And it's, well, first off, Ontario has one of the largest ones. That's the PAC. That's one of the largest ones in North America. Second is, after Patriot took off, it attracted so much more capital, and naturally you're going to have, relative to Ontario, you're all these area plays came in, and you're throwing more exploration dollars at a jurisdiction. Obviously, you're going to wind up with more discoveries there. And then there's other factors like the Quebec database, the geology database there is overwhelming. It's incredible. You can sort through the whole thing. You can filter by rocks that have been mapped. You can filter pegmatite with exposure and just pull that all up on a map and start staking away. My knowledge, no other province in Ontario has something, in Canada has something close to that. That's something that Quebec has done incredibly well. So with that, it's a lot easier to, I guess, generate targets in Quebec is another thing. And then depending where you are, the further north you go, the less bush there is. And, it might just be flying on a helicopter and you could see these pegmatites sticking out of the ground and landing right on it. And, the bigger they are, more likely they are to outcrop. So at our Flanders project, which is in Western Ontario, it's near the US border.
Yep.
So that's one of the ones that KoBold is earning into, splitting up into two different projects. This project we liked because it had massive pegmatites. Never been mapped before, but it's not one of those things where you could fly a helicopter over it and and just see them sticking out because there's a lot of tree cover. Even though the overburden's only this thin, there's barely any cover. We're seeing pegmatites up to 200 meters wide, and that's huge. And but you have to get out there, look under the moss, and in order to see your pegmatite, you can't just land a helicopter right on it. So it's a few different reasons, but to get back to your original question, yes, I like Ontario, and yes, I do like Quebec too. It's an area that we historically avoided because we were late to the game. Back when we started, I left Red Cloud right after PDAC of 2023. And by then, every sniff of lithium was staked up.
Yeah.
So we were late to the game. We had no choice but to make and generate our new discoveries from scratch. And when we were looking at assets in Quebec, we didn't even bother. Like, everything was staked up, and everything was way too expensive. So we acquired one project, and that's it, our Nemiska project, which we're hoping to step on for the first time this summer. But now that we are going public, and now that the frenzy has definitely calmed down, a lot of companies haven't been able to afford their option payments because they all acquired it from third parties, so they're dropping their ground. The prospectors can't find buyers, and if you don't spend money on it, you lose it. So ground is starting to open up now, and prospectors are down to almost give away projects for nothing right now. So now Quebec's a lot more attractive for me than it was before. And also, I do like I like projects near infrastructure, and I think a lot of people forget that lithium is not like gold. Lithium, hard rock lithium, it's a bulk product. You're just taking 1 to 1.5% material, and you're concentrating that to 5 to 6.5% material, and you're shipping out that concentrate.
Yeah.
So access to infrastructure is so much more important than, say, for a gold mine, because you're producing and shipping way more material. That transportation cost will really eat into your operating cost.
Yes.
And I think that's what Chris was kind of referring to before in Africa, where a lot of these lithium mines they're not close to infrastructure. So how do you get your product out to the market?
Yes. That's what's so attractive too. I think for like Ontario, you can see some of these areas, and I won't speak directly to your places, but there's so much access to hydro as well. So if it's going to be a big energy consumption to produce, people do care. Well, how are you going to generate this mine? And I'm leaping way down in the future here, but having access to hydro is a big deal to people. They look and go, hey, like we have access to hydro here in Canada, certainly in Quebec and Ontario. That makes things much more attractive to people as well when they look to go, where are you sourcing your lithium? And I guess this kind of feeds into this kind of discussion, not to get into politics, but we have to talk a little bit about like nationalizing projects, people really focusing on this West-East divide, and like, how will the West have control of their energy? What do you think, Chris, that dynamic that's kind of progressing? How do you see that? Is it a lot of noise out east with you, or is it not as they're not as concerned about it, or what's your take on this kind of shift that we start seeing here, especially with Trump as well, of we need to find these things and we want them to be ours, that type of idea?
I think people concerned about the geopolitical tensions and what that means for the robustness of supply chains have got a lot of reason to be concerned. And we've seen a lot of shots come out from China with other critical minerals, controlling or at least sort of monitoring exports out of China. So if I was a board member of a large manufacturer looking at things like that, I'd be quite concerned, and I would look to things like vertical integration strategies.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, when I look at North America and all those battery cell companies that are setting up shop there, I do think, you know, it is a bit of a no-brainer to look to places like Canada for raw materials. You know, it really must be said on the lithium front, though, a lot of the conversation should probably center around who's going to be doing the refining.
Yes, I was going to get to that. Yes. Touch on that, please. Touch on that.
Yeah, sure. Because you know, Eastern Canadian spodumene is quite stranded from where the market is today. Obviously, most spodumene is converted into lithium chemicals in China. So that's why Australia, specifically Western Australian spodumene, is you know, economic given its location. Brazil is okay given the low labor costs and electricity costs. Now Quebec has low electricity costs, but you know it's a lot of the Quebec and Ontario have low electricity costs, but labor costs are you know at the Western standard,
yes,
pretty high. So yeah, all bodies need to stand out, and the problem too is you know, the refining economics are a little bit challenging. So you'll find that a lot of the projects are sort of being pushed through their financial models to being vertically integrated into refining, because you know someone has to do the heavy lifting basically to build the infrastructure.
And what would it take, like basically, if Canada was to say, well, we need to refine this, like, it's what's the cost if they're gonna have to shell out if they say we can refine this in Ontario, Quebec, and even if they took it on their own backs and said, what would that cost of creating that be roughly? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to the price, but it's how much do you think it'd be about to get into that game? Never mind that you're going to catch the ire of China as well. Like, what would that look like?
Well. Yeah, refineries cost about $30,000 per ton of lithium chemicals, and you know, the US and Canada collectively will need about 1 million ton of LCE in by like say 2035.
Yeah.
So you know, do the math on that.
Yeah.
Well, 30 billion, I think.
30 billion.
Sort of total capex bill. So that's why there's so much emphasis on, you know, all these other technologies as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully bring the lithium to market at a lower cost point. But yeah, hopefully doesn't require too much taxpayer dollars to, you know, to get some of these projects up.
Now, it will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Koby, jump in. Yeah. Tell me.
Well, no, I don't. I'm just saying. You know, I know our government has definitely spent money on things that are less beneficial to our supply chain.
Yeah.
But without getting into that, yeah, I think jumping back to technology, you know, we're talking about clays, we're talking about DLE. And people kind of see this as, you know, the new innovation in lithium. There is not a lot of chatter out there about innovation that happens in spodumene.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, I'm not privy to it, but, you know, there's this old idea that if you wanted to run, you know, a spodumene to chemical conversion plant, that these plants need a very consistent source of feed. You know, the mineralogy between these pegmatites and deposits varies. So you need the same feed. And there's this view that, look, you can't just build a refinery and try and mix and match all these different deposits together to feed into your product. You know, that doesn't work. However, in the last, call it 2 years, I think China's proven that, hey, you know what, maybe that actually can work to be able to send these are just rumors that I've heard. Lepidolite and spodumene to the same plant, you know, different minerals, not even different deposits, but different minerals, and be able to produce a product. You know, there's something going on with innovations in spodumene for sure. And I wonder if we're able to get access to that here in the West without China. And as well, there is the other. There's definitely a big aspect that I'm missing here. In China, we have to keep in mind LFP battery chemistries really took off. And
Yes.
my understanding, with using lithium carbonate instead of lithium hydroxide, that you're less the qualification standards for some of the stuff that goes into these LFP batteries is not as strict as they are for NMC batteries, let's say.
Yeah.
Which require hydroxide. So, maybe that's how they can get away with it because LFP is dominant there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just, okay, the Western world, if we do end up adopting LFP the same way that China has adopted LFP, I still think that there's a bit of a mentality like, oh, LFP will never work here. But I think, I would never say that.
No. Yeah.
But, if that's the case, then maybe this idea of blending different deposits together into one refinery actually might make a lot more sense here as well. But we shall see.
That would be very cool. I mean, if that could be done, and I'm sure now that you've mentioned it, I'm gonna get my head into it and look, because that would be quite a changer, a game changer. It would be very advantageous for us over here for sure. I've got a comment here to Peter Epstein. Oh, we love Peter Epstein out of New York. I think it's peterepstein.com as well. I'll find it actually.
Epstein Research.
Epstein Research. Yeah. He's 2 comments here. He's excellent job to you, Koby. Quebec and Ontario will be a major lithium hub along with Washington and Brazil. I can't believe KoBold chose your company. They could have chosen any lithium company in Canada, well over 100 juniors, and they chose you. Congrats. Yes, goes without saying. That's
Thanks,
why
Derek.
it's a big deal. Peter's great. Thank you so much for chiming in. And of course, check out his research as well. Wonderful research that he does. Thank you so much for jumping on, Peter. It's great to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you as well. So thanks for the comment and the question. And let's jump into another one here. I mean, I could keep going because now that I've got you, I don't want to let you go. But I do know you've got you've got lives to live as well. But what's your take? Because this is a big game changer. Talking about lithium, is Rio Tinto entering the game with Arcadium? Like that's quite a game changer. That's very interesting. That says its signal as well as to if people think, oh, lithium is not interesting. Oh, I'm done with lithium. I'm focused on gold. Well, Rio Tinto isn't. So that's a big step. What's your take there, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, right now, where we are in the cycle is, brines are in vogue. And, Rio Tinto have come out saying we've been looking at lithium for quite a while. We've analyzed like the entire marketplace and we've chosen brine. Now, obviously, they had already chosen brine through their their piloting, or their $800 million purchase of the Rincon project, and then they built the pilot plant, the DLE pilot plant there. So they've put a lot of capital and their technical expertise into that. And then they've come out saying, we're going to buy Arcadium Lithium. So Arcadium have got, a lot of their history is in the brine assets, Hombre Muerto. And then, they do have some hard rock assets that they're going to develop as well, or are developing, Nemaska Lithium in Ontario, Quebec. Yeah, and so it's timely because it is giving a bunch of optimism into the sector. It is a classical counter-cyclical investment. I'm not sure how Arcadium shareholders feel about the valuation, but it's a big name moving into the space, which is really great for the development of the entire lithium ecosystem, really. But yeah, it's a huge vote of confidence for DLE. And as we said earlier, the jury really still is out on that. So we'll see.
We'll see. Good. What's your take, Koby? What do you think?
Well, I think I don't really see it as like they're betting on one or the other. I think they are still very, very active in spodumene as well. Um, it wasn't that long ago. Surely they were already in the midst of making a bid for Arcadium. That they continue to option more ground over in the James Bay region of Quebec. I think it was from I forget the name of the company, but at Saga, I believe, Saga Minerals or something like that. But they're continuing to do work up there. There's in one of Rio Tinto's slide decks on this, they talk about where they see the lithium market and how it fits into their overall business of and I have it in front of me, but the font is too small for me to read. I think it says 2043. They want it to be as large as their aluminum business and about 50% of their copper business. Like this
Wow.
is
Yes.
This is just to put things into perspective.
Yes. And that is the perspective. And I'll get your, because there's another question, and I'm going to wrap it into another one as well. Is that I kind of jokingly say, well, if you're tired about talking about EVs and you're in Canada or you're in the States, we can talk robots. I mean, if Elon Musk is going to make 10 million robots that he says, or a billion robots, how many robots he wants to make, that's going to require lithium for the robots. So I don't mind if you want to shift the discussion away from EVs and we'll talk about robots. But but on top of that, we've got Charles here who says, please address how ESS or energy storage systems, those battery growth will impact global demand, and what are projections, if you know, for ESS growth in the next 10 years. So to me, you can tackle both, one or the other, because to me, it's just pivoting to highlight, if you don't like just talking about EVs that people always kind of focus on, there's so much bigger market that's going on that highlights the demand for lithium. So maybe, what's your take?
I can jump in. ESS is a hugely optimistic sort of prospect for a lot of lithium being demanded. You just look at how cheap solar is around the world, and solar deployment around the world is accelerating. The solar manufacturers are having a tough time right now, but that's a separate story. So a lot of that solar will require batteries to transfer the power to times of the day when it's needed. We've seen project after project being announced. There's some huge ones being announced recently out of the Middle East, for example. It's really difficult to forecast, but if you take a crack at it, I think it's not unfathomable that it could surpass EVs as how big the market will be for lithium. And the CEO of CATL said eventually it'll be 10 times the size of EVs. So just consider how much lithium that would require. It blows the mind, really.
Just to add to that, Chris, again, to give people perspective, the current lithium demand for energy storage today is bigger than all the EV energy storage or all the lithium demand from EVs 5 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like that's how much it's growing. So it's don't underestimate this.
No. Okay, we'll jump into this one because it's a bit more fun too, and we can put on a little bit of skeptical hats or speculative hats. We've seen Trump come out and say, listen, if you bring a $1 billion project into the US, we're going to fast track permits, whatever that means. But when I hear something like that, he might be talking oil and gas, but I think of everything that's extractive and I think, ooh, exciting. And I'm going to pile that onto you, see what's happened in Argentina, where you have someone comes in who's changed the mining laws, and then all of a sudden, billions of dollars of deals flows in, and people are like, Argentina's ready for business. Do you see a pathway or a possibility that this could happen? And I would argue it has to happen, but could happen in the US and Canada, that there's this reformation of mining to understand if you have any attempt or desire to meet any of your climate goals, or whatever goals you might have, that there has to be a pathway that's very clear much shorter, in order to meet any of this demand. Like you're saying, whether it's for energy storage, whether it's for robotics, whether it's for EFG. Do you think that is possibly coming or has to happen? Do you have any thoughts? Either one, chime in, Chris. What's your thoughts?
I don't really see someone like Trump changing the landscape overly much, because he can affect federal permitting timelines, but there's still 2 more levels below him, state and local. There's so many stakeholders in Western environments that can bring lawsuits to the table and whatnot and riot in the streets, basically. So
yeah.
So, on the political landscape, it's good for signaling, and that may make, certain foreign investors more comfortable with bringing in dollars into the country to build plants or whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, probably the biggest issues will be more financial and technical. Is the risk capital available? Does it make sense to deploy in such and such a technology, given that there's no technical commercial proof of some of these technologies? I think they're going to be the main issues rather than federal approvals.
Koby, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll say, what happens after, mining's a long-term game. As much, even if you want to throw as much money in the world at something and you do all your permitting right, it's still hard no matter what, and takes a long time to get something online, up and running, and it's still might be longer than the election cycle. So
yes,
what happens when he's no longer in power?
Yeah. Well, and I guess kind of what I'm hearing is, and you hear like Rick Rule and others say, is that, listen, if you've got a special deposit, or like you're saying, Chris, if you've got a technology and it's proving and it's working with a special, deposit or project, that's likely has a very firm chance wherever you are. Someone's going to try to make it happen. And even in challenging areas, we see that happens. And sometimes it comes back to bite companies. But I would suspect that the West is certainly becoming more open to it. That if they find, a great project, that it can come online, and that at least the narrative from most politicians, and now I never like talking about politicians because, they talk, is at least positive that there's an acceptance that we need to get a supply chain of this. Can it be done? I guess maybe here's a good question. Can it be done without any of the resources? Like if the West says we want a supply chain of our own, can it be done without getting resources from North America? That's a tougher question.
Yeah, well, I guess you look at the way the IRA was set up, and the tax credits are able to be given to companies that work with free trade alliance or free trade agreement countries. Technically, I guess you could just rely purely on mostly Australia and Canada. So yeah, that could work. And then obviously, with respect to lithium specifically, in South America would also play into that as well. Yeah, I don't know if there is a lot of emphasis on. You look at what the DOE has said over the last 4 years with regards to onshoring production and using US exceptionalism, US technical prowess to onshore lithium production. That's all great, but there are perfectly fine lithium resources in those other 3 jurisdictions I just mentioned. So, why not look at putting spodumene refineries on the west coast of the US and bringing in Australian spodumene that way? That's an idea I've thought about. Or more of what we saw from the likes of Tesla with building their Corpus Christi location. Yes. That's ripe for either spodumene that's come out of Brazil or the Bécancour sort of area of Quebec. These sorts of things could be set up. Yeah.
Koby, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I my first place in North America is thinking somewhere near the Great Lakes. You can get out to the St. Lawrence River, can float right on past Bécancour and right into the ocean from there, and easy access between borders, U.S. and Canada. There's already deep water ports throughout, and Thunder Bay is a great place to be. It's got a there's at least 3 juniors that claim that they're building lithium refineries in Thunder Bay or close by, and we shall see. But it's and then there's also rail like all throughout and around that area.
This is interesting too. So what do you think you'll see more of the relationships building? And I mean, this would be a great time if I was a car company or if I was like the Elon Musk type to be looking for projects to go, listen, I need the amount that he's going to demand from Optimus, from the Tesla, from Model 3, you name it. Do you think you'll see more of that direct investment of we need this, and I'm willing to fund it, and we'll also then refine it maybe up in Canada. I know that Volkswagen has got that huge deal with Canada for batteries and building out cars in Ontario. Ontario's known for auto manufacturer. Do you see anything like that happening? That kind of money entering more aggressively as well? I know Ford entered into a couple different deals. I think who was it? The Australian
Honda
company?
did something at some point too.
Yeah.
I think the reality is like a lot of those downstream investments put into America by legacy auto and Korean cellcos will absolutely need to vertically integrate to some extent in order to run their plants. I think there's been a lot of complacency up until now, and I'm surprised that deals such as the Patriot Volkswagen deal have taken until now to sort of come to the fore. So when I saw that news, I was absolutely unsurprised by it, particularly in the IRA sort of environment, given the tax laws and whatnot and incentives. Absolutely. I'm surprised there isn't more investment. I think manufacturers are, they're celebrating how cheap raw materials are right now, and they're quite complacent. But this is the exact time when you should be laying down large investments upstream. And, we've seen some, but nowhere near as much as, what I would have had expected. So
I don't want to miss this as well, because someone may have come late as well. Can you touch on Africa again? We have someone asking like Africa, what your thoughts on Africa? I know you already spoke about it early on. Maybe just give a kind of a rundown as what you think coming out of Africa, moving forward, what that continent looks like.
Well, I guess really it's about Zimbabwe and Nigeria. There is absolutely a lot of spodumene deposits that have been known about for quite some time, and have been sort of explored more in recent years as the demand side for lithium is built out. The Chinese went in there, quite aggressively, say 4 years ago, and built plants or upgraded plants quite aggressively, in a period of like 1 to 2 years. And, Zimbabwe in particular is landlocked. So it has to, go down, ship its concentrate down to Mozambique or South Africa to get to China for conversion. So so there is the deposits do seem to be pretty decent, but they are hamstrung by infrastructure. So at what pace will China go in there and build out this infrastructure for sort of long-term longevity of that source of supply? We'll see. Nigeria, haven't done a ton of research, but there are 3 major Nigerian mines that I'm aware of that the Chinese have put a bunch of capital into. But yeah, a lot of that African lithium will be music to the ears of the prospective refiners in Europe that are looking to build their supply chains, because Europe really doesn't have any lithium outside of Yadar and Siberia and the geothermal brines in Germany, for example. So they're going to rely on particularly any spodumene that comes out of Western Africa.
That's kind of my thought, was to ask, do you think it will be regional plays like this that Africa could supply Europe? I mean, we know was it Sibanye has up in Finland, their lithium refinery? It's open next year, is it, or this year? Is it? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's right. This year, I mean, that's a pretty small project, but and it'll be really great validation of some cool refining technology, soda ash based technology. There's a lot of great stories coming out of Europe. Bit of a shock to the system coming from Northvolt. Crashing downstream, and there was a bunch of Chinese investors that have been a bit spooked and pulled certain investments out of the block. So but I still think there are plenty of projects that will get up and running, and they all need lithium. Okay,
so I'll let you wrap up here with because we deal with a mix of retail and some institutional type clients. But I'll focus more on the retail. If you're a retail client, where should you be looking at lithium at this stage? Should they be focused more on, you should be looking at a junior who's finding stuff? That curve is very attractive. Should you be looking at maybe this near-term production? What are your thoughts kind of for the look ahead for 2025, just one short year window, not beyond? What do you think looks attractive as a play? Or once again, whether it's a DLE play, whether it's like you name it, which ones are kind of standing out for 2025 for you?
I think you probably want to choose your jurisdictions and your lithium resource carefully. I think spodumene is sort of a bit down and out. So from an investment standpoint, it's probably the valuations are quite attractive. Brines are, going to be, pretty cycle proof regardless. So if you can find, an attractive brine opportunity, it's probably worth going for. If it's a DLE story, I'd probably want to be a bit more risk averse and sort of wait for a bit more technical proof.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, just keep a close eye on Aramat, for example. Tsingshan bailing out of that project, their 50% interest in the project, was, sort of a scary move. So you might want to consider that. And I'm a fan of Canadian spodumene. And then obviously, if you find something in places like Africa or Brazil, you might want to do a decent amount of due diligence on the risks involved. So
yeah. Well, Koby, we'll finish off with you, because it hits a lot of check boxes as far as when we look at companies. I mean, and if you're a retail investor and you think, I don't know enough about the space, I'll just go back to, well, hey, KoBold has a lot of smart people working for them, and as Peter Epstein mentions, they could have picked hundreds. There's lots of deals, and they picked you. So that once again is no guarantee of anything, but it certainly tells you that a lot of people put a lot of effort into analyzing what you've put together, what you've done, and they were $33 million impressed. So where do you think a good place to invest would be?
Well, obviously Libra, but let me back up a bit.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on people's view of the lithium market. If in a very, I'm going to broadly categorize brines versus spodumene. Okay. Those are both tried and proven evaporation brines and spodumene. And in a really, really, in a tough market, brines tend to outperform, right? Because they're usually lower on the cost curve. in terms of operating cost. They're lower on the cost curve. So they can, to Chris's point, often could be cycle proof. However, from a CapEx basis, like a capital intensity basis, they're they're a lot more expensive. So in a very tight market, like what we saw in 2022, where were the majors putting their money? They're putting their money for the most part in spodumene, and their acquisition targets for the most part were spodumene. And that's because spodumene mines much lower capital intensity, but also much quicker to come online. So, to my macro point, what I see, I think the future is bright for both. I think that the market is very, very tight. People are like, oh, we're in this huge surplus. No, we're not. We're barely, percentage terms, this is barely anything. We can easily go back in a deficit. And with every bank, even the most bearish ones, calling for a deficit to return by the end of the decade, I naturally have a preference for positioning Libra in spodumene right now. That doesn't mean that we won't look at brine opportunities too. I think in this market, it doesn't really make sense to drill because investors won't reward you.
Yeah.
There's odd exceptions. Like if you've got a 300+ meter wide pegmatite and you're, Q2 Metals is a great example of how a world's class discovery can do well even in the worst market. But our strategy is, okay, well, there's some really good projects that we like. We're going to be countercyclical. Fortunately, our hard dollar needs are taken care of. We have someone else spending the big dollars on our projects for us, so we'll still have those catalysts and those potential game-changing results. And at the same time, what we're good at and what we've done very well to date is low cost, but very high impact exploration. So I don't mean drilling and returning these amazing drill intercepts. I mean going out there and finding brand new spodumene occurrences that no one has ever found before. That's what we've proven our ability to do. And to give people color there, in less than 1 year, with less than $2 million raised, we found lithium mineralization on 3 projects, and these were all grassroots discoveries. According to, looking at our peers who raised a lot more money than us, it takes on average $4 to $5 million to come up with a new grassroots lithium discovery in Canada. That's what I found, anyways, in terms of capital raise needed to get there. So by that metric, we're very efficient at making these discoveries, and if we're able to do that in a bear market, I think that we'll do exceptionally well in a bull market, and hopefully we'll be able to repeat deals like the ones that we just did.
What are some of the catalysts that you have coming forward if someone takes a look at you guys and says, oh, okay, you've got me, Koby. What should I be looking at as milestones? Because once again, sometimes the stock market rewards people, other times it doesn't. To me, it's almost irrelevant. We're long-term. We like when people do what they say they're going to do and the project advances. What should they be looking at from Libra? What should they be expecting the next short six months?
Sure. So that takes us into our field season. So that's that's easy. So we haven't stepped foot on some of our projects, and these are projects that we own 100% outright. There's one that we staked immediately after our discovery at the SBC project, which KoBold is now earning into. But we have this other asset that on the back of that new discovery, we staked there right away, and immediately after there was a staking rush in this area. KoBold staked a land package. And Fortescue, a little company named Fortescue, started staking all around us as well. And again, this is something where we think that the potential is similar to what we just found, and we haven't stepped foot on it yet. We've developed some nice satellite pegmatite targets that we're able to see from Google Earth. And there's other projects as well in our portfolio that we haven't stepped foot on. And then there's M&A. So be on the lookout for that.
Excellent. Lots to happen. I'll mention here, Peter Epstein is thrown in here too. We get an extra analyst involved as well. So everyone, you've got 3 analysts on here. Brines are no longer brines. Not all brine projects. He says hard rock in Canada and Brazil, the way to go. He's very happy. Stay away from the sub 100 ppm lithium brines in Western Canada. So there's some take from Epstein Research. Go check out his website as well. Thanks for being on, Peter. That's great. Also, Chris, specialty clients, like if someone is reaching out, you work with like funds, institutional investors. If someone wants specific data, that's what they're coming to you from. You guys have like institutional grade like research, and it's all up to date, up to market. I can go and ask ChatGPT, tell me something, but it's going to be like old data. You guys focus specifically on driving latest up to date data. Who's your target client?
Well, really, it's anyone that is looking to get an extra edge on their research and get some really high quality data and insights. Delivered in various formats. We have monthly, quarterly, annual reports where we go into deep dives into various metals. And we also have some neat live sort of web-based data trackers as well. So some pretty cool products. I'm working on building one now for the whole suite of battery metals.
Nice.
So that'll be one to watch. Just stay tuned. Follow me on all the socials, and you'll get the updates that way.
And I'll be remiss to say that you also have a big rare earth event that you do as well. People are becoming much more aware of rare earth as well. Kind of under the same, I would argue, thesis as lithium. I mean, it's dominated by China. They're ahead of the curve, and people are starting to wake up and realize, it's not rare. There's a lot of it, but refining it and who has access to it in this logistical supply chain is critical. You guys do a big event on rare earth.
Yeah, exactly. We held our inaugural rare earth focused conference in Toronto in September last year, and we're following that up exactly 1 year later in Toronto again. This year, so do look into that. It'll be great to see some new faces there this year. I'm loving the exposure to the magnet side of the industry. It's absolutely fascinating. I think any analyst that or any observer of the battery space should be going up the learning curve for magnets and motors as well, because they're really interrelated industries.
And we'll have to have you on talking about that specific point, because it is what's so fascinating about these metals, these battery metals, is that you get to then talk about all of these other end uses, like you get to talk about tech by proxy, and that makes things very exciting when people see how these EVs work with I never say this right, neodymium with the magnets, and of course we'll touch on robotics one day as well. But it's so fascinating to see how these things are being used and how critical they are to all these things that we're kind of taking for granted, like all this energy that's going to be required. So hopefully we can chat with you about rare earths in the future as well. But we really appreciate your time today. You spent quite a bit of time with us, Koby, as well. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. It's great to have, as well as Peter Epstein, all these analysts to inform us and to let us know and to remind us that sometimes it's the ugly ducklings the way to go when people aren't paying attention. And I remind people, it's not, as much as the narrative of drill, baby, drill in the States, and yes, they're going to be doing some oil and gas, and that's going to happen. The PayPal mafia and Elon Musk have the ear of Trump and the administration. That transition is not changing. It's not moving. It's going to go ahead just because it's maybe not in the news right now. The money is already being spent. That momentum is happening. People love the response that they have at these EVs. They're very fun to drive. And sometimes people can get swayed by headlines and news and not realize that this is happening. It's going forward, and you can find companies like Koby's out there that are doing incredible things under the radar. And that's often no guarantees in life. That's how you make asymmetric gains, when you identify companies that are meeting a critical need and doing so methodically, and also impressing analysts and funds and the likes of KoBold. So thank you for helping us out here and increasing our knowledge base and all of our subscribers. I really appreciate your time, both Koby and Chris. It was a wonderful time speaking with you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.